for Tuesday, September 7th, 2021. We begin our agenda this evening under general business with the verification of the meeting being posted. Stacey, has the meeting been properly posted?
Yes.
Thank you very much. Now we're going to be moving into the time where we allow for public comment to our committee. Each individual will be limited to 3 minutes. Dr. Cook will signal when you're at the 2.5-minute mark for you to wrap up your comments. We expect all speakers to honor our time limit, refrain from any inappropriate language, and be respectful in your comments. Speakers who do not meet these expectations may be asked not to speak at future meetings. We also expect the audience to be respectful of the speaker and the Board of Education. Each speaker tonight should begin by announcing their name and address. Speakers who are minors should not announce their address. All of this speaker information will be published in the meeting minutes. We will begin our public comment portion of our meeting tonight with Paul Reese. So welcome, Paul.
Hi, I'm Paul Reese. Came up tonight to talk about the pornographic material in our schools, and I stand against it, and this is where I separate from even like Stacey and Keene and some others, as I don't think it has any place in our schools whatsoever. There is a time and a place for everything, and this is neither of them. This is great expectations. This stuff is not. There's no learning value to it whatsoever. I've heard it said that, well, this could help someone reach out who's been sexually assaulted or sexually, assaulted, give them a way to speak out about this. The problem with this is it's not done in a condemning way. My Bible talks about a lot of things that aren't appropriate. It talks about David and Bathsheba, and it talks about it in a very condescending way, that what David did was wrong. And it's left to no one's imagination that what was done was wrong. But this crosses a line to where it can even cause arousal in a young boy. It's presented in a way that what are we trying to do? Create sexual abusers, sexual assaulters, future problems? Because it's brought in a way in a time in a life where you're trying to figure out what's right and what's wrong. When you're looking for that box of what's normal and what's not. And to present this stuff to kids so young as that this can be somewhat, this is a school district that had Slender Man, all right? It should know better. That the 2 kids stabbed someone, which none of us, the adults in this room, would ever take it that way. Could ever read these articles and ever take that material, meaning what 2 kids take it. It just, their reasoning is not there yet. We're supposed to govern their reasoning. We're supposed to set a higher standard. If somebody's parents doesn't want to set a higher standard for them, that's up to them. But when it comes to school, this is where my kids go to school. These schools determine the property value of my house. And to do this kind of garbage is absolutely unacceptable. And it's pornographic. I think it's almost like we're experimenting on our kids again to see whether or not we can turn future kids into a bunch of pedophiles. It's unexcusable, and it doesn't belong here. What people do on their own time is what they do.
30
this
seconds.
This is a public school, and it doesn't belong here. Thank you.
Okay. Next this evening, we have Stacey Keene. Welcome, Stacey.
Hi, my name is Stacey Keene. First, I want to thank Kelly. This isn't teaching and learning, but it needs to be said, for not caving to a vicious mob, along with the other 3. It wasn't about food, and everybody knows it. I know this board and district would not have let children go hungry, and the awareness was brought to their attention, and I'm sure they would not have let children fall through the cracks. I am so disappointed after what we witnessed, the abuse we witnessed, that 5 of you caved to the threats. I'm so disappointed in our board president and our administration for not immediately putting out a press release stating that the Washington Post and their accusations, and all the accusations, were outright lies. It is shameful parents had to help to do this. A ridiculous email instead was sent out stating what the options were. No mention of it being a lie. The email should have explained in full detail what was happening. So, on to teaching and learning. I will tell you, I lost all faith in our school district when I started seeing what kind of books were in our libraries. I trusted you. Every parent trusted our teachers and our librarians and our school district to have material available to our children that was appropriate. And instead, our librarians, and I'm sure many of our teachers, were purchasing books on my dime that are extremely inappropriate and pornographic. And these were at the fingertips of our children. Having said that, I am hopeful that things will get better. I do know so many of you are working to make it right. So I hope that many of you follow through with that. And we have a proper vetting process for our books. I do want to read, since I have some extra time, a message I got from a parent today. I'm not sure if it's from all the hard work of the parent. Let me back up. We get a lot of hate. Trust me, we get a lot. I know you guys do too. So do us parents who are out there fighting for our kids. But she's saying thank you. I wanted to say thank you. I hope the district was as shocked as I was as a parent of a high school and middle school student. Since the beginning of the school year, I have received a copy of the assigned reading list from both of my students' English teachers. On the list, there was a link with all the harsh words, a link for to look at the books she was offering. I just want to say thank you for all that you and other parents have done for the parents who share a lot of the same values. So there are parents out there who appreciate this being brought to the forefront. Thanks.
Thank you. Next this evening, Laura Peterson.
Hello. I am wanting to address you this evening regarding the new policy around non-political signage in our classrooms. I know that that's not specifically on the agenda tonight, but I know that the AVID program and the at-risk identification program is, and both of those kind of relate to this topic in my estimation. If this policy was strictly limited to actual political signs or things that could be directly limited to politics, like even the slogan of Black Lives Matter or Blue Lives Matter, I would be completely in support of that. However, unfortunately, this policy has now been extended to include signs about this is a safe space, all are welcome here, or even simply saying this is an anti-racist environment. And I have a hard time seeing how any of those signs have anything to do with politics. I believe that by asking for those signs to be removed, that goes against the district's mission statement on diversity, as well as the non-discrimination policy that we have, as well as our no tolerance policy around bullying. Because by removing these signs, you are inherently saying to students who have seen these signs in the classroom before that, oh, well, if I don't see that, this is an anti-racist environment, or I don't see that this is a safe environment, then I guess anything goes, and I don't have to be respectful of my fellow students. I happen to be, I don't know if you know this or not, but an LGBTQ person. I have a wife, and I came out after high school when I was an adult. But if I had been in high school or middle school questioning my sexuality and I had seen these signs come down, it would have given me great pause. I know that you may say, as far as LGBTQ issues go, that this is something, if a student is wrestling with it, that they should handle on a personal level with their family. But I'd like to challenge you to think about what it was like when you were kids and you had the talk about birds and the bees or
30
sex.
seconds.
Even as a straight kid, that is not a comfortable conversation to have with your parents. And so the only people left in your life at that point is your teachers or your fellow students. I believe it's important that teachers be a safe place for minorities and LGBTQ people. So please, either ask Dr. Siebert to reconsider this or add it to your agenda for next week. Thank you.
Thank you, Laurel. Next this evening, Michelle Hilska. Welcome, Michelle.
Hi everyone. I'm Michelle Hilska, I probably can't speak as eloquently as Stacey or Paul, but I do want to touch a little bit on the food, the whole food thing. And yeah, I believe in actions speak louder than words, and it's very disappointing. It's very disappointing. I watched the May and the June the meetings, and and it was really disheartening how things had happened. And I'm extremely proud of the 4 board members who stood their ground despite letting the mob dictate what they should or shouldn't do. And I would hope that the remaining 5 can maybe look within themselves, and instead of chasing whatever they were chasing to make their decisions, might think twice about that again. Because, with everything going on in the teaching and learning, you guys might vote on something, and how do we know that, a month later, something gets posted in the Washington Post, and then all of a sudden everything changes. And if we cave in on something as simple as food, I mean, we got CRT, we've got all these other issues that are coming down, masks, everything. How do we know that that's not going to be the next thing on the agenda that's going to, we didn't, we made a rash decision, we got to look this over again. I mean, it's I don't know, it seems really ridiculous. So I looked through the whole agenda that was going on tonight, and I'm really grateful that parents like Stacey and Rebecca and some of the board members that really, in my belief and how I feel, are really looking out for the best interest of the kids rather than some political organization or some, like I said it once before, chase the money and you'll find out exactly what motivates people. And, I hope that, I'm really grateful that I'm here tonight. I just want to say thank you to those who did stand their ground against the mob, and to those that didn't, I'm really disappointed. And
30 seconds.
Everything with the teaching and learning, I'm grateful for the changes in the library, the transparency, and I hope that it doesn't backfire. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. Next this evening, Samuel D'Amico. Welcome, Samuel.
Thank you and good evening. So today I'm here to speak on the topic of inappropriate books, and I find myself in a situation where I'm agreeing with some people I don't usually agree with. And it's because this issue isn't political really at all. It's just on the matter of, I'm not necessarily in favor of banning books, and I don't know that too many people are, but parental notification is an important issue, and I don't see an issue with informing parents that these books are in our libraries. Parental notification that has not really been done in the past, because a lot of parents are finding out about recently. When I was in elementary school and starting my years in 6th and 7th grade, this wasn't as much of an issue back then, and I didn't even notice this as an issue. And it seems that a lot of parents are now getting to realize that this is happening, that parental notification seems like a common sense thing to do. And also for older students in high school, that should be dealt with on a more family-based system of also giving parental notification, but still allowing children to read those books if their families approve and everything. Going on a case-by-case basis of what books should be removed, what books shouldn't, that should be a decision dealt with by the board on a book-by-book decision. But I don't see a general problem with giving parental notification. In fact, I strongly support it. Because, whether or not you want a book removed or not, we should all be aware that those books are in the library, if some of us do have a problem with that. And so I know that, personally my own mother, she would like to be aware of those books that are in the library that I would be able to get, not that I necessarily want to pick up those books, but I think a lot of parents would be really wanting to understand that those books are in the libraries, if in fact they'd like to have that conversation with their parents, with their children. Most parents do. And so I'm just asking for the board to consider policy that would move forward for vast parental notification of a book that could be, is, and obviously and would be found as inappropriate or material that would be age-specific. Even maybe putting a rating system on books so we understand what books are what. Just something that would further lean into policy on how parents could best understand their child's education. Thank you.
Thank you, Samuel. Next this evening, we have Abel Hernandez. Welcome, Abel.
My name is Abel Hernandez. I'm 8th grade in Horning Middle School, and I'd like to personally say that that I also agree with Sam that we shouldn't ban these books. They may educate children in the future that what happens in the real world, what bad things can happen. I personally like reading books based on real fiction, like narcotics and also sexual harassment, things like that, because it also teaches me in the future that bad things do actually happen and that it could cause major problems. Another thing that I also agree with Samet too, that they should send out at least a weekly newsletter or at least some type of letter showing that these books do exist in the libraries and that their parents should sign off on them whether they could read them or not, or they should or shouldn't. But that's just my personal opinion. I also think that some books, as like the sexual assault one, I personally don't think that one should be in the library because, well, I do and I don't, because it's about sexual harassment and it could get in too much detail of what happened in the book. But another thing is, like I said, it could educate children on that's really horrible and that could damage a person in the future and that can cause them to do something really dumb. But yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Abel. Last this evening, we have Rebecca Flatterly.
Hi. I'm asking you to put out a correction to the email about the free food program, because if a family can afford to feed their children, they should, because it's really taxpayer dollars that are paying for that food. So we should set the record straight about that, because if we can afford to feed our kids, we should. And I also want to say thank you for taking down the signage in schools. Our schools are a safe place. We don't need a sign on every door to tell us that it's a safe place. But tonight I'm here to talk about this book that's in the Banting School Library. It was put there about a year and a half ago, and it's called Not My Idea, a book about whiteness. And I want to read some of this to you, and as I read it, I want you to ask yourself, what educational value does this have, and how did it make it through the vetting process? It's made for children, anyway, as young as 4. When grown-ups try to hide scary things from kids, it's usually because they're scared. They want to bury the truth. Deep down, we all know color matters. Skin color makes a difference in how the world sees you and how you see the world. It makes a difference in how much trouble to find you or let you be. In stores, in cars, on sidewalks, at school, your skin color affects the most ordinary daily experiences, including which neighborhoods welcome you. Racism is a white person's problem, and we are all caught up in it, mostly by refusing to look at it. You can face this. Understanding the truth takes courage, especially a painful truth about your own people, your own family. Even people you love may behave in ways that show they think they are the good ones. Racism was not your idea. You don't need to defend it, but you can bring your curiosity to learn about it and see that it's true. In the United States of America, white people have committed outrageous crimes against black people for 400 years. Many white people did things they should never have done, like denied opportunity, denied housing, denied voting rights. Many other white people failed to see problems with this. They exploited black people and chose power and wealth. These choices put wealth and power into white hands, homes, and neighborhoods. Racism is still happening. It keeps changing, but it keeps being the same. And yet just being here, alive in this moment, you have a chance to care about this and to connect. But connecting means opening, and opening sometimes feels like breaking. And then there's like this dialogue with this mom, and they're pushing back on their mom. Mom, I don't feel good. Should I pull over?
30 seconds.
I need to know what's going on. Why didn't anyone teach me real history? I do see color. I see yours, mine. You can't hide what's right in front of me, and I know what that police officer did was wrong. Go with your instincts on this one. Racial justice, if it's possible. And it just goes on and on. Teaching kids to like push back about their kids. White supremacy has been lying to kids for centuries. White supremacy is pretend, but the consequences are real. Whiteness is a bad idea. And then it's a contract basically with the devil about whiteness. Shouldn't be in Banting Library.
Thank you, Rebecca. Anyone else this evening that would like to address the committee? Okay. Thank you very much. Before we move on, I just want people to know that Ms. Roddy is excused from tonight's meeting. She's already contacted me about that, so she will not be here this evening. Moving on to our action items, we're looking at the first action item, the approval of the Teaching and Learning Committee meeting minutes from our August 3rd, 2021 meeting.
I'll move for approval.
Thank you, Mr. Baumgart. Thank you, Dr. Piasek. Any questions, comments, discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes Stacey 4-0. Next, we're looking at the approval of our district's 5th through 12th grade at-risk identification plan. Luke Pinion, our Director of Student Services, is here this evening to share information with us and then to answer any questions that we might have, as this is an action item this evening. So welcome, Luke, and thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. Good evening, board members. I don't have a slide deck for you tonight, but you do have in your packet, a copy of our School District of Waukesha identification plan for students at risk of not graduating. And not only is it an identification plan, but it also outlines some of the steps we take in our schools to address this when students meet this criteria. So I'll walk you through this. Feel free to interrupt me at any point if you've got any specific questions about the sections. The first page just talks about our philosophy that all students can and will learn, and then outlines Wisconsin State Statute 118.153, which is the statute that gets into the criteria Wisconsin uses for identifying children at risk. So you have that outlined there. There are many factors. Children have to meet at least 2 of those to be considered at risk, or you'll see there under subsection B, they would have already had to drop out or ceased to attend completely to meet that criteria. Of the criteria in here, the first one is that they're 1 or more years behind their age group in credits attained, so that would be applicable for our high school students. Also, there's 2 or more years behind their age group in basic skill levels, so basic reading, basic math skills. 2M is habitually truant as defined by statute. Number 3 would be that they're school-aged parents or currently parenting as students. 4 would be adjudicated delinquents, and 5th would be 8th grade students who score in the below basic level on the forward exam. When you continue on through the plan itself, and I should note there have been no changes in this plan over the last couple of years, so it's coming to you as it was last year. What has changed is behind the scenes, the data that's available to us to make the identification processes, and I'll get into that in just a minute. The second page talks about our intervention practices as a district that uses a multi-level systems of support, meaning we have a universal level of services all students receive, and then from there, when they're not responding, there's a secondary level or a tier 2 that's more selected, and then if they don't respond at that level, there's more of an intensive or tier 3 level of services that they receive from an academic or behavioral standpoint. Then you get into the definitions and the identification processes. So what I've done here is just broke down the criteria that the state of Wisconsin has, and I've outlined here what data sources we use to pull from. This is a bit of manual data. The state has the dropout early warning system, but it's not aligned perfectly to Wisconsin statute, and it makes sense because a lot of these pieces are highly confidential pieces of information that are maintained with just select people in the district. So the first one, again, dropout, I spoke to that. A student who has completely ceased to attend school, haven't been picked up by another system, and despite all our efforts, are no longer attending. We see that more often when students turn 18 that meet this criteria. The other one is that they're 1 or more years behind their age group in the number of high school credits attained. That's a simple credit report, and we've got a formula we use with our school counselors in terms of how many credits would be 2 years behind, so they're able to pull that right from Infinite Campus. The next criteria is that they're 2 or more years behind their age group in basic skills. We use the measures of academic progress, our MAP, math and reading scores. We'll be using the spring window for that data this year. The other one is habitual truant, so statute defines that, and we have really clear reports we can run in Infinite Campus and lists of students that we filed on to the county for habitual truancy. The next one is really a confidential piece of the parents, so students that might be parenting or pregnant. And then another confidential piece is adjudicated delinquents. We get that information directly from the court system to student services, and we then distribute that to the school psychologist, social worker, or counselor as part of this criteria, and for their planning for the student, of course. And then the last criteria is the forward exam in those 8th grade students who are below basic level there. And then moving on, it just outlines in this plan, again, as it has in years past, we use standardized letters that go out to parents when they meet this criteria. This year, we're asking the letters be sent out by November, the end of November, November 30th. By statute, they have to be sent by March, and we used to do this process in the spring, but it didn't make a whole lot of sense to be identifying students in spring with very little time to remediate after identification. So we've moved that process up to fall, and now we have fall map data that we're using. So really, this process will be running likely through the month of September into October. Once the map window is closed, they'll finalize everything, and those letters will go out either end of October or mid-November. And then it talks about, once you're qualified of at-risk, you really are expected then to have a problem-solving team meeting at the school level to talk about what kind of plan is needed for you, specifically based on the criteria that you met statutorily. So it kind of goes into detail about the letters that go home to parents. Certainly we like parents as part of our PST meetings whenever possible to attend and be at the table when we're problem solving around these issues. There's oftentimes a lot of different routes to these areas of criteria that might be contributing to the student's at-risk status. Talks about how we monitor that. That's all again through that PST process. Yes, Bill?
I didn't really want to interrupt, but I want to catch you before you go into the next part. All of these definitions here are repeated year after year after year. So there's nothing different there, but have you noticed anything different in which one is the biggest problem, or which ones are the bigger problems, or something getting better or something getting worse?
I think credits becomes a big one.
Credits?
Credits is where a lot of students are funneled in, but that's one criteria, so they still have to meet a secondary criteria to actually meet. So just being severely credit deficient is not enough to meet the statutory definition. Now, certainly we would be problem solving around that in our SST meetings and talking about how to remediate out of that, but you still need another one. But I'd say a lot of our data shows that that's one area that a lot of students would fall into.
Okay. Thank you. So that's the kind of question I was answer I was looking for.
Yeah, that's a good question. The plan also outlines, when we are talking about students with disabilities, their plan really is the IEP, the Individualized Education Plan. So we don't create another new plan for students with IEPs. We go through the IEP to address this, which, when we write good IEPs, they're already addressing these issues, of course, and more. Certainly bring students into the conversation as well in terms of planning and how we can work through to get to that graduation line. It's everyone's goal. But again, the plan is pretty straightforward. I will say I've been in 2 other districts, and I've been pretty proud about how Waukesha formalized this process. This was not a very formalized process in either of my districts before, so I think we do a really good job really being intentional and focusing on this every fall to make sure we're not letting students fall through the cracks that might have otherwise not made it to that graduation line. That's all I have. I guess I'd be looking for a motion, but certainly questions first.
Luke, if a student has a 504 plan, which would allow them to have modifications or accommodations without qualifying for special education, would they not be considered at risk?
They would still be considered. Now, we would have to look at the specificity of the 504 plan and what the physical or mental impairment is, and if that 504 plan is doing enough and targeted at these areas statutorily, and if it wasn't, then we would be revising or at least looking at an at-risk plan to compensate for that.
Okay. And then I just had a question. It says once a student has been identified as at risk, they will always be considered at risk.
Right, so that's really the intention of that we don't forget about the problem solving that's gone on, right? It's easy to have one big meeting where we talk about everything, make a good plan, but we want to continually revisit that meeting.
Right.
Now, they might not meet criteria the next year, but the sense is like once they've been identified, we're not going to let them slip. We're going to make sure we've carried them through to that graduation line. However, there's really no formal label that's going in Infinite Campus or anywhere for the student.
Okay.
This is all behind the scenes, so there's no visible labeling happening of students going on.
Okay. It isn't like the student and parent are like pulled in for a meeting or anything?
Just the problem-solving meeting. I mean, I guess I shouldn't say visible. We pull the parent and student in for meetings.
Well, that makes sense.
But we're not flagging them NIC, and that's not like, putting this red flag on them, if you will.
Right.
But that process should still continue as they make it all the way to that graduation line to make sure that they get there.
Right, and it's just really someone after that, once they are out of the program, there is someone there monitoring that to make sure they don't slip.
Absolutely.
Yeah, which I think is a great idea.
And you can understand how that gets tricky too with transitions, right? From middle to
Exactly.
high school, or if students switch high schools, like we want to make sure we keep a pulse on that. So there's a way Student Services records this
Right.
in a confidential way in IC that not everyone has visibility to see, like every teacher can't just see that.
Sure.
So that if and when students transition, they are not lost either.
Very good, thank you. Dr. Biasic.
Okay,
Okay.
go ahead.
Thank you for this, Luke. I appreciate it. The definitions are helpful. They say who is responsible, so it sounds like that's a pretty systematic process
Very
when
much.
folks pull that data. I just have a couple clarifying questions. So on the dropout definition, and you referred to, maybe a 17, 18-year-old high school student, how long is someone on our at-risk radar if the parents aren't engaged? What does that process look like?
So let me just make sure I understand the question correctly. So if a student, we've identified them as at risk and they've completely ceased to attend, technically once they're 18, they can make that choice. We'd exhaust all our efforts. There's not like a hard, fast line, and I don't know, Dr. Cook, if you have any other different views on this. There's not a hard, fast line. Like I supervise our social workers, and they're constantly doing home visits in these situations, trying to reach out to parents to all, but there isn't necessarily this window where all of a sudden we give up, if you will. Again, though, once they're 18, students have that legal right to make that decision. So that becomes a little bit trickier, and we're always kind of chasing that 18th birthday in a lot of these cases to try to get them before they hit that mark. But that's often when we see sort of, we would lose more students at that
And that's what I'm
point
thinking.
in
There's a
time.
point where communicating with the parents may be fruitless.
Yeah,
They experience those frustrations pretty regularly, I would say.
yeah, the 18th year. And one of the reasons why, you'll notice that this identification and this planning starts in the 5th grade. You can start to see those indicators in the 5th grade. You can see, lower performance on the assessments. You can see patterns where non-attendance is starting to pop up. And so we try to engage things early. Oftentimes, we'll partner with the county to get county involvement so that the family can have a caseworker. The other thing, though, on the back end of it, when a child does or a student does turn 18, and if they do drop out, our door is still open to them until they turn through their 20th year. So it's important to note that just because you decided to drop out at 18 and walk away, it doesn't mean that we're done with you. We will allow you to come back through your 20th year to finish up your schooling.
Just to follow up on the evaluation process, there's a couple bullets here on 70% attendance and then remaining in school. So we're kind of measuring the success of our at-risk identification as keeping the kids in school, meaning I'm assuming coming occasionally or at least occasionally registered, so they're on a roster somewhere. Is that what we define as remaining in school?
Yes.
And then the 70% attendance, just looking at the definition of habitual truancy, that seems well within the definition of habitual truancy. So that's not a ton of attendance.
I believe that number came from this predated my time here, but I believe that number came from the Department of Public Instruction in terms of what would be considered, a success criteria for at-risk.
And when we did put this together, I think it was 6 or 7 years ago, we were noticing among the kids who were qualifying for services over at East that we were looking at, students who are attending 30 to 40% of the time. So if we could get 70% of the time, we felt that we were doing a good job with them and keeping them engaged. It was at that time that East's attendance rate was between 70 and 75% as well. So we've seen an increase there in their daily attendance, which is great, but this was the marker for the plan.
Mr. Como.
Yeah, thank you. Just going back to, once a student has been identified at risk, they'll always be considered to be at risk. Is that statute driven, or is that a choice that our district is making?
I believe that was a choice when this was originally first approved. Again, it hasn't changed in my 5 years, but it's certainly something you could discuss.
How many at-risk students do we have in the district?
So any given year, between 100 and 300. So it's ebbed and flowed.
Okay. Do you have that broken down by grade level? I mean,
It's
probably
broken
not
down by school, by grade level each year.
I'd be interested just in receiving that. Maybe you could get that on the update.
Yeah, I can send it to you. Know that a few years ago, there used to be other criteria that this board had added to the identification. At one point in time, homelessness, and there were some other pieces. But over the years, we got back to just what statute had as our identification processes because there became some other problematic concerns with some of the additional criteria. So that has greatly changed to the numbers that you'll see when you get that spreadsheet.
Do you also have that, an indicator of how many of those students that are at risk also have disabilities?
That I do not have at the ready, no.
Okay. It'd be nice to have at least just a general percentage, if you get a chance, and if it takes you a month.
Well, what we could do
that's
this year
okay.
is simply, as each school turns in their data, right, because this happens at all of our sites, and then they're populating spreadsheets, and it's a very manually intensive process. We could certainly just, when they report back to district, include that factor in there. We could start collecting that easily.
Sure. And then when we look at the success criteria, can you give us a sense of what percentage meet the success criteria, like by the end
So
of the year?
those are
or is that
all
in the middle of-
monitored on an individual basis. So I can't give you an aggregate of that. It's each individual school monitoring their plans. So again, it's not collected district-wide other than the straight count and the disaggregated grade level in those pieces. So I don't have a percentage of all the at-risk students year by year, how many got off their plan. It's a very fluid number too in terms of, they're not recounting this multiple times throughout the year. So we don't have that kind of data available.
Okay, fair enough.
Any other questions for Luke? Mr. Como?
Yeah, I move to approve the district's processes and procedures for identifying at-risk students in grades 5 through 12.
Thank you, Mr. Como.
I'll second that.
Thank you, Mr. Baumgart. Any further discussion or questions?
Just one comment.
Go ahead. Comments? Yep. Go ahead, Mr. Baumgart.
I've sat through many of these CNI and now T&L meetings over the years, but recently we're getting much better information at the board level. I think we're getting much better information in terms of understanding it. I mean, we probably talked to us, you probably gave, not you, somebody probably gave us numbers in the past, but now we're beginning to understand what they define and that's our thanking you for
That's
that.
good. It means we're doing our job better here then. Right?
Good. Keep at it.
Anything else? Okay, we're looking at the approval of the at-risk identification program for 5th through 12th grade students. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Passes Stacey 4-0.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Luke. Next this evening, under our third action item, the approval of the elementary, kindergarten through 5th grade McGraw-Hill Impact Social Studies resources. We have Dee Garcia, our Director of Multilingual and Global Education, with us tonight, as well as Melissa Yao, our Director of Elementary Learning. So welcome, Dee, and welcome, Melissa. We look forward to your presentation tonight.
Thank you. All right, so we are back at what could be the final time looking for approval tonight of our elementary social studies. Tonight, you just get Dee and I, but the last couple times we've been here, we've had multiple educators from our system presenting with us. We are here tonight to answer a few of the questions that you had last time. So part of what we will be doing with a new resource and moving forward would be looking at our minutes within the school day. So it would be 30 to 60 minutes depending on the grade level and alternating it with our science curriculum. So we would be, part of what we would be doing is building out that scope and sequence and time within the instructional day.
Ask questions throughout.
Absolutely.
Does that overall increase social studies time at the elementary level, or does it stay the same?
It would stay the same. What we will try to do is really get a great system in place with the science and social studies, and look to see if we can fit both of those in during the day or by unit. Currently, we do it by unit, and so we want to try and get better. We do have some content integration with science and social studies. We have some writing units that integrate writing and science together. Same thing with some of our language workshop and reading that have some social studies content. But really wanting to make sure that we're providing our students with the science and social study direct needs.
That coordination, you've already thought of that. It's
Yeah.
on the radar.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be.
And it'll be something that we look at as we build all these pieces out. Yes. All right, the next piece that was asked about, so this resource, so that is the total amount there that the cost and what goes into that. It would be a 7-year bundle purchase of digital and print materials for kindergarten through 5th grade. So it would be the print resource books, which you all had samples of, or they're sitting there in front of Dr. Piacic. Print and annual renewed consumables, so that would be the student material. So every year the student would get, at their grade level, a new consumable book that they would be interacting with, a journal of sorts. The teacher's edition, so every teacher would have a in-person hard copy, an Explore magazine, and then professional development is also included in that cost. The digital resources, that was a question that was asked, what really are those digital resources? So it's everything that's above, so the teacher manual, they would also have a hard copy, but it could also be digital, which would be very nice as you start to carry home lots of books and materials. You'd be able to pull something up at home if you were working on lesson planning, or you'd be able to take the book home. There's also presentation tools, so it can really enhance the lesson, so opportunities for teachers there. Interactive media tools that the students would be able to use. Assessment tools are there digitally. Differentiation, so really getting into looking at some of the pieces for our students who are English language learners, and different ways that you might go about presenting the material if students need to have it in a different way. Mini lessons that you could access, as well as videos and songs. And the digital resources that are there, they don't take students outside of the McGraw-Hill resource, so they don't go outside of that. It all stays within their program.
So the plan we have moving forward includes both curriculum development with this resource and professional development simultaneously. So what we propose to do is to meet with our grade level teams each month, as well as our professional development representative from McGraw-Hill, to both support us to learn how to use the resources and help us to make the critical decisions that we are going to have to make in terms of building a scope and sequence and developing, I think, rich systems to be able to not only teach our students the skills that they need in the areas of inquiry and argumentation, but also these skills of building quality assessment of learning so that we're able to know at every step of the way what the end goal is. As you can see on the slide, we've got some plans moving forward starting out yet this month. Around September 22nd, 23rd, Melissa and I will be taking a deep dive ourselves in learning about the potential that a 3rd through 5th grade scope and sequence offers. Those of you who have some background with your own children or educators yourselves know that there's a huge change in social studies between the primary and the intermediate. There is much more content that is a potential in those areas, and as a result, we're going to have to really place the content strategically. One of the content areas that we are going to have to be particularly astute to is the content that is required of us of Act 31, which is teaching about Native American and Indian tribal sovereignty, which is very different than teaching about the cultural ways of tribes in the Southwest. So we've got some work to do in that area. Our rep will be working with us and our team starting September 30th to present the framework, because there's an instructional design that really brings through our students' opportunity to ask questions, be able to revise primary and secondary sources, to build argumentation for, against, or through a different lens on how to answer their crucial questions. So that's very different than traditional social studies, which has taught, here's the story, learn it, retell it, apply it in some way. This is a very different type of approach. So that will be new to our teachers, and I think really important as they begin to put some muscle on that skeleton. We go through, as you can see, each month. We continue with implementation training around the framework, getting into the scope and sequence through November. And by November, we would really like to be able to have Appendix B of the curriculum design process completed with a full scope and sequence and an idea of what these units are actually going to look like, so that we can spend the rest of the winter and spring months actually designing the activities and bringing our resources into both Blackboard and to essentially an elementary syllabus of what the experience is going to look like. Everything will culminate towards the end of the year with we hope, the completion of a Blackboard shell for all of our students and families to take advantage of as they go into the fall. We would like to have a professional development plan in place for next fall, and we need to have a literacy plan in place for our dual language learners going into the fall. So all of that is detailed throughout the year. Next. So we'd like to open it up to additional questions from you, but also help you to make a recommendation and motion for approval on these resources.
Greg?
Mr. Baumgart.
I think last time we met, I asked about the books and our bilingual programs, and you indicated that was working together. I guess at this point, beyond the books, do you see any significant deviations between doing this at our handful of bilingual schools versus those that are not bilingual schools? It just would appear to me one would be much more difficult than the other, but that's maybe naive on my part. So
I think the one difference is that at a bilingual school, because of our comprehensive literacy model, we alternate languages by unit. And so in the units that are not taught in English, we rely on the social studies content to provide the foundational content for us to teach literacy through in grades 2 through 5. So I think the only difference that we would have is that we do have substantially more requirements for literacy standards and literacy instruction in the content area. We're just designed that way.
Okay.
So anything that we would use, anyone would be able to use, but we must do it for that program.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Dr. Piazzik.
Thank you, and thank you, Dee, for spending a little bit of extra time with me going through all of this. I've spent a lot of time with these books. My little tabs here. And I just want to share that I really found the material to be very factual, unbiased. I like how the complexity of the text really advances over the course of the grade levels. I thought the questions were good, the way it drives discussion. I think at the end of the day, it's a question of how these books are implemented. And I think if we really can be true and open to the conversations that follow, depending on readiness and age appropriateness, that they were factual and unbiased, and I think really well done. There were some elements, especially getting into the older grades, where there was a bit of more leading the conversation, which was maybe more disappointing. But I've had the opportunity to review some elementary social study text from other districts, and I think this is probably as good as it gets when it comes to factual and unbiased material. So I think that consistency, and I think as we kind of looked at the outcomes and where our proficiencies and things are, this is probably going to be a game changer as far as students being prepared for the testing elements of this. So I know there was a lot of work that went into this, so I appreciate that. I would have loved to look at the second grade material too. There were a couple things in there that I was curious about, but for the most part, I do think that as a structural foundation for learning, that this is a good choice.
Thank you. We appreciate that.
How old is the resources that we're replacing? How old are they?
What we're replacing? Old. We have found textbooks in classrooms with copyrights in the 90s.
Yeah, over 15 years. It's, yes.
And the price tag on this, when is that due? Is that
So
due
the price
initially, or
tag
how does
is
that work?
Yep, the price tag is about $300,000, and because we were so, I would say not advanced, but prepared in this process, we actually budgeted for that amount for this budget cycle, so we will be able to purchase these materials before July 1st of the next year, which actually allows us to do a pilot this year with the teachers that are going to be part of the curriculum writing process. The total budget is $300,000. That includes all of the consumables for 8 years, all of the digital resources, all of the professional development, as well as the textbooks for students, and I mentioned the consumable.
And those, they send you every year, so it's just like our phonics adoption that we had. Every year they send new materials, and students each year are getting the new book at their grade level.
And do they also assist with professional development? Do they have people come out from the
They will
company?
be working with our core team over the
Okay.
course of this year with professional development, and then it is upon us to develop a professional development plan going into next year, and then any new teacher following during the next 8 years of the adoption.
But we can tap on them additionally at any time, or we could choose to use them to, let's say, next year at Summer Institute, we could bring in their consultants to teach too. But we're going to start off really saturating our social studies team, which is a representative from every building, and working with them first, so we can really get a good
Very
layout.
good. Very good. Thank you. Mr. Como.
So it's one payment up front, or is it broken up into multiple years?
No, it's one payment up front, as we have already budgeted for it. It's currently sitting in the budget.
Okay. I just didn't hear the one payment.
Yes.
I knew we budgeted
Yeah.
the full amount,
It's
but I
one
didn't
invoice.
know.
Mhm.
Gotcha.
Yep.
Okay. Which I'm okay with.
Dr. Piazzi.
Just a couple of quick follow-ups. I did notice that Mr. Como's sample books were not in really good shape. Was there a production problem with your books, or did you not store
I
them
had
appropriately?
extra glue, binding glue, that was not on the binding part. It was on the top part, so I had to carefully separate pages in multiple parts of the book. So hopefully that quality is not the quality on the books that I had received. Hopefully is not representative of what
Yes,
we'll
I'd like to let you
receive.
all know that the books that you all got were actually used by students during the pilot before you got them, and they had been sent back to Lindholm, repackaged, pulled out, and assembled for you. So I apologize if there was a book with some sticky pages. It was a tough year.
I think it was more,
More the
it was more of
quality.
a production
Yeah,
issue.
it wasn't from a child. It was from
Okay.
the production. It was
Good to know.
definitely real glue put on the top instead of in the binding side, so.
I'm 100% confident that if we ever got something like that, they would replace it.
Or there was a really clever student.
You never know.
We have a lot of those.
And then I'm just curious, is there an opportunity to transition away from any other resources that we have right now that we may be paying subscriptions for? Things like Brain Pop that come
Oh, we
into the
don't-
social studies curriculum? Or?
Brain Pop doesn't come out of teaching and learning, so it comes out of the Common School funds. So
It just personal experience, it seems like that is used quite a bit in the social studies
yeah, and
space.
that will definitely be things that we look at, what we would stop using
Away
because we
from,
wouldn't
okay.
need that resource anymore because we would want to stay within this.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anything else? Looking for a motion? No, I'm looking for one.
I'll make the motion for
Thank you, Mr. Walker.
elementary social study resources.
A second.
Thank you, Dr. Piazzi. Any further discussion? Questions, comments? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes, Stacey, 4-0. I just want to thank both of you, and I know the rest of us do too. Incredible amount of work gone into this.
It's just beginning.
I have a feeling it's just beginning. Yes, thank you so much.
And I know it's just the beginning, but I have no doubt that the two of you will be able to move this forward with much success. And just thank you very much for your time, commitment, and your leadership to this district. We're in good hands with the two of you behind this. So you will be back to visit us, I assume, sometime in the next year, just to give us an update. And,
Absolutely.
okay, and we
And
look
with
forward
some of
to
our teachers too, who can give you
Oh, that'll
more
be great.
updates who are piloting and doing the work with us on that team as well.
That'll be awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, have a great night. Okay.
We'll be back.
We're moving on to our discussion information items this evening. The first one is an update on AVID from Yasmin Duran, our elementary AVID coordinator, and also Amanda Wagner, our secondary AVID coordinator. So welcome to the two of you.
Thank
Thank
you all
you
for
for being
having
here.
us tonight.
Thank you.
So we just want to give a quick update on our AVID system here in the school district of Waukesha. And as you look at the little AVID person there, a reminder that AVID is something that is school-wide. It serves all of our students who are part of an AVID school. It then serves a particular group of students in the AVID elective, geared for our students who are typically academically in the middle. Many are first-generation college-going students. Some have other obstacles. There's really no ideal AVID student. Every student has a story, and every student then has the opportunity to be part of that AVID elective once he or she enters 7th grade. The AVID Excel system is designed for our English language learners starting in 7th grade, where the major focus is academic language, and then those students will move into the AVID elective come 9th grade. AVID Elementary is designed for all of our young elementary learners, and we'll talk a lot more about that as we go on with our presentation. But we just want to share with you where we're at overall as a system. So we're growing, which is wonderful. We currently have an AVID system in 18 of our schools, and you will see up there that we're really spreading into our elementary schools. The number behind each school is an indication of how long a school has been part of our AVID system. And then you'll notice over at our secondary schools certify. Our elementary schools do not certify yet. They will be certifying this school year. Last year, due to COVID mitigation, AVID Center said elementary did not need to certify. Secondary, it was optional, and we did push our schools to certify at the secondary level. We're very happy to report that all of our schools did certify, so they're AVID certified sites at the secondary level. It starts at implementing. We don't have any schools at our implementing level. They are all either meeting, emerging, or a site of distinction. So the site of distinction is a very challenging recognition to receive, and we're proud to say that both North and South have met that certification level, and we have Butler and West at emerging. Another celebration from our system from last year is in May, South became our first national demonstration school here in Waukesha. It's been a 14-year process for Waukesha South, and they've worked extremely hard to be that AVID certified national demonstration school. Now, that does not mean that everything is perfect. What it means is we have teachers who are using the AVID methodologies to make sure that we're instructing our students in writing, inquiry, collaboration, organization, and reading, helping to ensure college readiness and career and community success. What that allows us to do at Waukesha South is open our doors to visitors who are interested in implementing AVID, which South has been doing for many years, even to our own district, and get them in to see what AVID classrooms look like on a school-wide level, not just the AVID elective. So huge celebration for Waukesha South last year. AVID continues to grow. We recently held an AVID Path training August 17th and 18th, where we had over 150 of our educators come in early and spend 2 full days learning with us about those different AVID strategies. We saw those AVID strategies then modeled by our presenters at our own Summer Institute here in Waukesha. And I think we can both say that we've been visiting schools quite often in the first couple days here. And seeing a lot of the strategies modeled throughout the buildings.
Yep.
One thing you'll notice is I always like to give you a little bit of data. I know it's small up there, but we surveyed our teachers who attended that 2-day PATH training, and 97.9% of them said that they would recommend the AVID PATH training to a colleague, which is a huge celebration because it's saying that what they received, they can take back to their classrooms, they're going to use it, and they feel that they're growing as an educator, which then is impacting our students. A little bit of data from our senior class from last year. We had 82 AVID senior scholars. So it's our first year with a graduating class from North, West, and South High School, as well as eAchieve. We had 2 scholars graduate from eAchieve AVID. And those 82 seniors had over 302 advanced placement courses. So 82 kids, 302 AP classes. They also received almost $5 million in scholarships, and knowing our kids, they tend to sell themselves a little short with what they receive for funds, so I believe that number truly does sit above $5 million. I was at West High School today with their current senior class, and they have already $188,000 in scholarships within the first 5 days of school. So they're like, we're gonna beat last year's class. I'm like, it's not a competition. Mrs. Wagner, it is a competition. So, and most importantly, we believe that 100% of our students, as surveyed, said that AVID helped them become a better student, and they would recommend it to a friend. You have those senior data infographics in your packets. Feel free to ask questions about those. We also want to point out where we stand nationally. So AVID Center provides data. We provide data to them so that we can ensure that we are doing and implementing AVID with fidelity here in Waukesha. That's why our data is so important. 94% of AVID students nationally are accepted into colleges, 90%, and then 94% meet those requirements. Here in Waukesha, we're super proud to say that 100% of our students are accepted to four-year colleges who apply, and they have the entrance requirements. Not all of our students choose to go to a four-year college. We have many who choose a 2-year program. We have some that do the military, but all of them leave with a plan. And as we continue to grow AVID Secondary, we have seen the need for AVID Elementary, which Yasmin is going to talk about now.
So as Amanda mentioned earlier, we have a total of 10 elementary schools who now have staff that is AVID trained. 5 of those are brand new this year, with more than 50 staff members being trained during the Summer Institute. And then the other 5 have already had AVID implemented in the last 4 years. And this year we're really taking the opportunity to relaunch. Our goal is to develop site lead teachers and site teams that can come together to look at data, talk about AVID strategies, plan events, to really strengthen that leadership within our schools. And our goal is to eventually become district-wide within the next couple of years. So the biggest difference between elementary AVID and secondary AVID is that we don't have the AVID elective. We don't have AVID Excel, right? We do AVID with all our students every day in every class. The goal really is for our students to develop academic habits, things like organizing their thoughts, the time, their material, learning to really collaborate and communicate, asking higher level questions, and starting to learn how to take notes, because we know that that process can take 15 years. So really the goal of AVID Elementary is to close that opportunity gap before it even starts. That's kind of a quick little update on elementary.
What questions do you have for us?
Well,
Mr. Baumgart.
Amanda knows I'm going to say something here, right? Well, I've been watching the AVID program for all these years, and to me, it's just one of the most exciting things in starting off with the South High School graduations and things like that. And you're not kidding when you say they feel good about things, and they will share that good feelings. You see it every time you visit one of the graduating classes. It's amazing, and we've seen them in here a couple of times too. So this is one of the things that I know I am proud of, I didn't do the work, but Amanda and a couple of the other people that were with you at the beginning bought into a wonderful program, and our kids are benefiting immensely by participating in it. And Yasmin, to see now that we're getting that kind of lead into the elementary schools is very exciting. And I know it's a different way of looking at things, but we've had elementary kids here in the room. And again, they tell you the truth. And they like what they're doing. They like being organized, understanding organization, taking notes and some of those kind of things. So this program is doing very well, and it's well worth it. So thank you.
Mr. Como.
Nationwide, how long has Avid Elementary been around?
So Avid as a system started 42 years ago. Elementary, I would say, is about 11 years old.
I thought it was significantly newer, but as you gain success in the secondary levels, that spread to the elementary levels. So, yeah, it's good to see the elementary level. I remember some of the students feel like you're hearkening back to it. It's really neat to see elementary students excited about something like taking notes. That's just, I know I was never excited at the elementary level taking notes, so appreciate it.
Dr. Piazzik.
Okay.
Thank you for the update. I have a couple questions. How are the high school students identified for the program?
So we use data, and we do a big data pull with maps, with Forward. We also then ask the 7th and 8th grade teachers for recommendations for students who they feel would be a good fit. We then have our 7th and 8th grade Avid scholars visit other classrooms, and they do a short little presentation on what Avid is all about. So that way, if a student isn't necessarily recommended by a teacher, but says that sounds like something I'm interested in, Avid stands for Advancement via Individual Determination. So we're always looking for students who self-advocate as well. The students will then apply. They will, parents and guardians are invited to a meeting where they learn about what Avid is and what the commitment looks like. And then students do an interview with multiple people from the school site team. And then they decide if they want to sign their contract or not.
Are there situations where students are declined?
Sometimes if students are not ready yet, for Avid, or if we don't have enough sections available for students, we have had to have some waiting lists for them.
We experienced Avid early in the elementary schools, and the binders were humongous. Has there been some discussion about how to help the younger kids get that experience without lugging those
Yes.
big binders around?
Yeah. Every school really comes together to develop their organizational system. And then a progression is created. What does that look like in kindergarten, right? Is it just a take-home folder? In 3rd grade, is it an assignment notebook and one thoughtful log? And so how does that grow? And it might look different in every building that you visit. Some buildings, they will have multiple notebooks inside the binder, but it really comes down to the purpose. What are we using it for, and how is it going to best serve the students?
Just one last follow-up, and this is maybe just looking at this from a business case perspective. So we pay dues to Avid for the program. We host the Avid Path training during our summer institute. We host other educators at our demo school, and we pay dues to Avid. We're putting a lot into this to help advance the Avid program. Are there benefits back to us as a district for doing those things?
I feel like the numbers that we showed with our seniors, that's a direct benefit on student achievement. So absolutely. We have benefits for our educators as we have access to tons of resources on My Avid with core strategies that we can learn from. Our educators are able to attend right now everything's virtual, but virtual events free of charge. Most of them run at nighttime, so if they choose to do that on their own time, they can do those things. We, as a national demonstration school over at South, South receives, they're able to send one, I believe it's the principal, to the national conference free of charge, and they also receive a free summer institute registration. So it's definitely a partnership.
Too, I don't know if you mentioned, but we get that at a discount compared to sending, most districts that can't offer it internally would have to send them out for that training. So because we offer it here with experts in the district, also we get a discounted rate with that.
Okay, and not to get too far off topic, because I don't want to, I don't want to minimize the student success in the program, which I think is exceptional. Are we obligated to do what's in that PATH training? Do we get to choose what elements of that we host, or is it all of it?
So there are probably about 35 different PATH trainings that we can pick from. And if we bring the presenters in from Avid Center, they will present the material as it is intended to be delivered. Now, Yasmin, myself, and Stephanie Warner from eAchieve, we are all Avid certified staff developers. So that was another benefit, is they trained us to be able to train our teachers. And we created, with the help of Avid Center, a Foundations 3-6 training designed specifically for our Avid elementary teachers here in Waukesha, where we were able to draw some pretty strong connections of this is how Avid is meant to be done, in conjunction with our CLM model, in conjunction with what we believe here in Waukesha. Great question.
Do you ever hear feedback from students after they graduate? And if so, could you tell us what they say?
Absolutely. We, all the time.
And do you do that intentionally, or does it just happen? Or
both.
Okay.
We typically reach out. We connect with our students to make sure that they're doing okay, because we say, you know, once a student, now is a student. They will tell us that they still do those notes that they didn't like to do, especially the Cornell notes. They do take the notes. Many of them still use a big binder to organize themselves in college or in life in general. They say that they're better self-advocates and their leadership skills come through. Many of our students will also say that they are the students in the college classes that the others want to sit and be around and want to be in their study group because they know how to run a study group.
Can I
add, go ahead.
And Amanda will remember this. 4 or 5 years ago, we had a group of kids that had graduated at and they joined us for a board meeting to share their experiences. And I think it was before we got even to the other high schools. But the outcome from that was just tremendous. These were kids, and we didn't have any trouble getting them here.
Right.
They came from different cities to that meeting.
Right.
It has a profound exposure to those kids.
Anything else? Thank you very much, both of you, for your update and your leadership. Do you plan on coming back sometime this year?
Just let us know when. I don't know. We'll be back, and I'm sure you'll hear from a lot of our Avid scholars.
Yes, awesome. Thank you so much. Okay. Our next discussion information item this evening is the reading state statute, educational process and goals. We have Melissa Yao back again this evening. She is our Director of Elementary Learning. So welcome again, Melissa, and we look forward to your presentation this evening.
Hello. So I come every year bringing the similar news. So this is one of our policies, and we are required by the state to do this. It's the presentation of how we are assessing our early learning and what our reading instructional goals are. So we're going to start off first by, I'm sorry, at the top of that I have the wrong year, but this is our literacy goal. So our entire district this year, every single school has a literacy theory of action. So this year, every single building is working in synergy, really trying to increase the improvement of our students. And one of the ways that we find out this is through our assessments. So at our early learning years, we use the phonological awareness literacy screening. We call it PALS, but we try to stay away from acronyms when we are in the presence of others. And this is a foundational literacy screening. And so students in 4K through first grade in monolingual use this assessment. It assesses those early learning skills such as letter identification, beginning sounds, rhyme, early writing skills, and early reading skills. And then second grade dual language also uses the PALS assessment. It is required to be given in the fall and again in the spring. There is also an optional middle of the year assessment that you can give to any student that you're wanting to keep a closer eye on because maybe they didn't hit that benchmark range that they needed to at the beginning of the year. So there is an optional middle of the year that you can give, but we require in our district to follow the suggestions of PALS and do the fall and spring administration. This does meet the Wisconsin required literacy screener, and so it used to be that the state required everyone in the state to give the PALS assessment, and then they said districts could choose their own. We really felt that the information that we got from this phonological awareness literacy screening really gave us a good look at what our early learners could do. We also felt we could make sound instructional decisions from the information that we get. It identifies students who are at risk of developing difficulties and diagnoses what students' knowledge of those fundamental skills are. We're able to monitor progress and plan instruction and target students individually and in groups to work on their next steps that they need.
This is that assessment given one-on-one, like with it?
There different parts of it are. So there's some parts that are one-on-one, there's some that are a small group, and some that are whole group. So it just depends on which part of the assessment.
It's not computerized.
It is not computerized, no. And then, additionally, we give the measure of academic progress. You hear it lots of times as MAP. We give that in 2nd through 9th grade. It is required in the School District of Waukesha to be given 3 times a year, so we give that in fall, winter, and spring to 2nd through 9th graders. It measures what students know and informs what they are ready to learn, and it is it dynamically adjusts as students take it. So it is a digital assessment, and while students are taking it, if they get a question correct or wrong, it moves and adjusts levels so you can try to find that just right fit and really look at what are students able to do and what would be their next step. And we can track progress with MAP over the school year and over multiple years. So that is what we use in the School District of Waukesha for our early assessment requirement. Any questions?
Bumker.
This gets to a question not on the testing, but on the requirements. So the state requires us to do everything that's listed here?
They require us to have a early literacy screener. So they require the younger grades, so the K through first, they're required.
And beyond that, it's just our choice? Okay.
Anything else? Looks like we're good to go.
Be back next year.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Melissa. We appreciate it. The next discussion information item tonight is how parents can assess curricular units and lessons. We have Rachel Herman, Director of Secondary Learning, Dee Garcia, our Director of Multilingual and Global Education, Melissa Yao, our Director of Elementary Learning, and Dan Pochinski, our math instructional coach here with us this evening. Welcome to all of you, and thank you for being here tonight.
I don't think it's on.
Everyone, can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay, great. As Rachel mentioned tonight, we're here to talk a little bit about and provide more information to the community guardians about how to access children's
That mic over, this mic isn't picking me up. You have to get going real quick.
All right, no problem. One of the easiest ways to access any curriculum in any district is to go onto their website and search the area under teaching and learning, but particularly in our district, search under the area of teaching and learning. And what you will find below that is a tab that has academic standards matrix. Most districts will have a connection on their district website to the state standards. When you go into our website, under departments, locate teaching and learning, and very quickly underneath the left-hand column, you can click the academic standards matrix. You'll find standards for every single department that we have in the school district of Waukesha, from literacy through technical education subjects, family and consumer, world languages, etc.
Right, and so I'm going to go a little bit deeper into what we have at the elementary level of family communication that we have in place. So currently in place, our schools send out regular newsletters, either weekly or monthly. Also, our elementary classroom teachers send out classroom newsletters, either weekly or monthly. In those, they preview what is to come in the curriculum, celebrations of what has been learned. And then also at the district level, we have district math newsletters for each unit in our math curriculum in grades K through 5. So hopefully some people in the room have seen these come out. This will be our third year now with our, we call them math moments, that should be sent out prior to each unit of study. We also have a math family help site that you can find all of the newsletters on there if you can't wait to get them home, previewing each month. But it also gives some really great support to families. Math, as you know, might not look the same as when we were learning, and so sometimes you might wonder, why are students exploring math in this way? And that help site really gives some great ideas of how you can support and explain some other pieces. So all that website can be accessed from our district website as well. Now, new this school year, you will see literacy links coming home for each unit in literacy K-5. So the first one will be coming out this week, will be sent home as the first units get going in literacy. Also, it's not up yet, but on the district website, down at the bottom, you see 3 and these are literacy overviews that will be up for each grade level. The first page gets into reading and previews the books, the essential question, and the main standards and learning targets of each unit. The second page gets into our writing curriculum and shares what genre of writing they are studying in the unit, the essential question, and the standards of that unit. And then the third page gets into phonics and gives the year-long overview of all of the skills that students will be learning in phonics for the school year. So that should be up by I'm going to say by the end of next week, hopefully the beginning of this week, as I work with Mary Jo to update the district website. And then next, what is to come, the science team will be meeting this year 6 times during the year, similar to the social studies team, is made up from at least one representative from each building. They are going to be working on science newsletters, very similar to what we have in math and literacy, to go home to parents previewing before well. And then part of what we will be doing in social studies is also creating the parent newsletters for each unit of social studies. So those will be items that teachers will send out as part of their communication, as well. Helping to support our teachers and all of our families to get a better picture of what's happening in the classrooms.
Melissa, are those in Spanish as well?
Yes, so they, all of the math ones are already translated and have been. The literacy pieces are being translated. We have the first units done. Those will be created ongoing throughout the year. And so there are some differences when it comes to literacy. The books are different depending on what unit it is because if it's in English or in Spanish. And so we'll be creating those sometime. Everything will be translated because we know that we have some families that might be in our monolingual program who need the Spanish translation. Also, we'll be creating those. And then on the district website that Dee referred to earlier, what's currently there, and then those literacy overviews will be added here. We have the elementary handbook that we review and update every year. We have a really nice updated handbook this year. It's been completely revised, and hopefully families find it much easier to read. And then we also have the literacy roadmaps that go into a deeper explanation of our literacy curriculum at elementary. Those are on the docket to be updated next summer. Those have been in the district for about, I think, 5 years now. And then we also have those roadmaps in math. Same thing. They've been around, I think, for 5 years now. This could be possibly going into, I think this is going into the 6th year. Those are also all translated, and then that's where you can find under the parent resources the link to that.
So at the elementary level, right, most students don't choose their courses in 2nd grade. They all take literacy and they all get math. And so as Melissa stated, there have been some overarching general family communications that are created to help our families understand what that curriculum looks like. As students progress through school, though, they have more choice and voice into the courses that they take, and there are certainly more pathways that are offered to them. And so, for example, a student in a social studies track might choose to take a psychology class over, for example, criminal justice. And so while we don't have standard family communications, what we do rely on is our learning management system, which is Blackboard, for our teachers to upload all of their curriculum, resources, and materials. And all of our families have access to that. So thank you, Dan. We know how, at least I do as a parent, how overwhelming email can be. And so again, a middle school or a high school student might see upwards of 8 teachers in a week. And so we don't expect our teachers to send out, right, a weekly communication. And now as a parent, I have like 8 emails per week of, right, expecting what it is that I'm supposed to keep track of. But instead, what we tell our families is that at any point in time, you have access to your child's Blackboard courses. And on that Blackboard course, there are certain pieces of information that you have access to. You have access to the teacher information, the syllabus, which details the course objectives, the learning targets, the core proficiencies that your child is expected to reach by the end of the semester, the end of the year, a general course overview, the detailed units of study, and then any resources, handouts, and daily lessons. If you remember last year, this was a system rollout of Blackboard across our K-12 land. And so while this is our expectation that all teachers have this, we do know that as we onboard new teachers, learning this learning management system is going to take some time. And so this is a continual work in progress, but these are our expectations of what we would ask that teachers have up, and that, again, a family can go and access any point in time. We most recently sent out a family communication detailing how parents can access their child's Blackboard course, and our principals and teachers will continue over the month of September to message that out, because that is the primary hub where families can go to see their child's resources.
And then at the elementary level, last year was our first year with Blackboard. Middle of a pandemic, and it was quite the learning year, and our teachers responded very well. There were some things that we did really well, some things that we didn't. One of those things that we didn't do as good enough a job on is really helping to educate our parents. So we hope that the video that went out really gives better understanding of how to access. We know at elementary, lots of times our parents understood what Blackboard was, maybe if they had the model at home where they chose virtual, because many times the way that you support a young learner is different than how you might support a student at high school, and really want to make sure that parents have access. As we looked and analyzed, we did some mini focus groups last year with our teachers, our coaches, our principals, to really get feedback about how at the elementary level we can really use Blackboard as an instructional tool to help enhance. And we're still trying to figure that out. So this year, in our second year of using Blackboard, we have the minimum expectation that teachers are doing one lesson a week. This year, we continue to hope that our students will be with us most of the time face to face. And so we really want to see how can this tool really help enhance what we are doing when our students are there with us. What is required that teachers at elementary have to keep up to date is their teacher welcome page, and continuing to add those communications. So those letters that they send out, that those are always continuing to go onto their announcement tab on Blackboard. So we're beginning to set the stage, really want it to be a welcoming tool, go and find those communication pieces, as well as being able to see a minimum of one lesson a week. And the school will be choosing what area the school is focusing on. Many people are choosing to do that around their literacy goal, so that things are tied together and making sense. So some teachers might be doing a lot more than a minimum of once a week, but we really 4K last year did use Blackboard. Our 4K students did all have individual iPads last year, with feedback from families and teachers going into this year and not having a virtual setting unless you were at eAchieve. Our 4K students do not have individual iPads. They just have a class set. So 4K is not using Blackboard. We didn't feel it was
Well, good evening, everybody. As a parent of 3 students in the district, teacher of 2nd grade, and uncle of a high school student who's over at North, I get a chance to see many different perspectives of how parents are expected to access the curriculum through Blackboard, through the units of study that go through newsletters and all of that. So it's really exciting to get this out to parents, and I'm really here to show you some tips and some tricks and really what to focus on in my very busy day as a parent that could help my son or my daughter. So there are a few things I want to remind you of before I actually jump into a student's a perspective, from a parent's perspective of what Blackboard looks like. So the first thing is when you enter into Blackboard, there's a dashboard there, right? So this is not to throw you off. It's a dashboard with all the courses that your son or daughter may be enrolled in. Second thing is once you get in a course, where do you look? So let's get to the course, and then where do we look to actually find what they're learning or what their assignments are, what they're going to experience. So although we have some things on here, I'm going to walk you through this, but for the sake of ease, let's go through this. So when you get to a class, on the left-hand side, there's going to be My Classes. So when a parent gets their login information, which we've sent videos about how to get that in both Spanish and English, you got to look to see what class your students are in and then navigate there. Other place that's really important to possibly look if teachers are using it is the My Announcements. Teachers can use this as a way to project out announcements to their classes. I would say only about 20% of our teachers use that because it's, let's be real, Blackboard is a huge system and it's used all across the country at universities. It's very powerful. So we don't use all these tools. The only places that I look are those two places to get in on the dashboard. All right. So I've logged in. And this is an actual site, an actual student, and I'm pretending to be a parent. And you can see on the, it's pretty busy page. And this is where I think we could lose some people in terms of where do I do? Where do I look? But what you can see on the left-hand side is the My Classes area. And on the My Classes area, you can see all the classes that this particular student is enrolled in. If I click on one, I get into this particular course for this class. This is the Avid 12 class. I know you just heard about Avid. Bring it full circle here. This is one of our great teachers, I believe at Waukesha West. He's said, go ahead and show this site off. So once you're here, where do I go now? Well, of course, you can look at the course syllabus, the course overview, but I need to help my son or daughter with the homework they have, right? Or I need to figure out, what, they're saying something about this, I want to check it out. Where do I go? There's two places to make it really simple for where to go. The first thing is calendars. Teachers really like to have calendars or weekly plans set up, just like this particular teacher. The second place to go is units. And really, the calendar links directly to the units. So both places are a great place to start. So I'm going to click on units. I can see here's that monthly menu again. Here's September. And I could see what's happening in week 1. For consistency's sake, I want to show you another website or another course. I'm going to go back to the dashboard and I'll click on another course. This one, go to computer apps. So you can see once again there's a weekly plan. A lot of times this looks like this. It could look like a calendar. Teachers really make this look a little bit different. But in the end, what they have is what we're doing, the icons, what's happening, and links to the units. So within the unit, these are the 2 units. This is a computer applications class. Students are learning about Microsoft Word, what to do with Microsoft Word, getting examples. There's videos in here. This is where you could access that particular content. Before I move on, does anyone have any questions about some of the key areas where a parent could look to get their students' content? All right. One last thing. I had a question. As a parent, what if I have multiple students? And this is what I learned from the video that I read from the email I got a couple days ago, right? So I'm learning too, is that when you're in the parent area, at the bottom right, there's a parent dashboard. And if you click there, you see all of the names of your students, or your children, right? And you can click on that particular child, and you can go to their dashboard. And you could just keep changing right there. So it's one login for all your children, or anybody who's they're under your care. The basics, bare bones of Blackboard as a parent.
You going to provide your cell phone number for all parents?
We have a great technology team to help to support with any of that.
Greg? And I'm not sure if this is for all of you or one of you, but quite obviously what you're trying to do here is open communications with parents so they know more about what's going on and back and forth. Not sure it's made it any easier yet, but have you or will you be getting feedback from the parents about whether this is adding or subtracting from? Where are we with that?
Sure. So last spring at the secondary level, we did send out a family communication or a family feedback survey to collect some of exactly what you're talking about, like what were some of the barriers around Blackboard, what were some of its strengths, and that feedback was what was used to garner our what we're calling our Blackboard Checklist 2.0. So we will continue to administer some surveys. In addition, we are also going to be looking at the utilization of what we're calling focus groups. So we did have a few of our secondary sites pilot those, and that was just bringing in groups of both students and families. And that was in some groups, some schools through the use of their site councils or parent advisory committees. To gather just informal feedback on what's working, what's not working, what do you want to see that's not there, what is on there that, again, is like too much that you don't need to know. And so we'll continue to utilize that feedback, again, both students and families.
Thank you.
We have one more slide, and to Dan's point, we do have a beautiful technology help site that is available on our SCW district site. And so the video that was sent out to families is very short and sweet. It was purposefully not like a 15-minute video because we know that, again, nobody has time to watch a 15-minute video on how to access this. And so it was really to the point of how to get to the nitty-gritty of what you need to know to empower you to see what's in your child's classrooms. So I just wanted to end with this piece, which is we of course are striving as a system to continue to deliver guaranteed and viable curriculum. We are striving to ensure that, the same course alikes are driving towards the same learning targets, the same course outcomes. With that said, day-to-day lessons might look different in the very same course. And that's because the students within those courses, are different. And so our teachers will refer to the supplemental materials policy when they go to identify any type of supplemental resource to either enrich or support their guaranteed and viable curriculum. Prior to bringing in any of those materials, they do consult that policy. And again, those materials are really intended to enrich, extend, and support, or in some cases remediate the learning. Some examples that you might find on a Blackboard course that, again, if I were to compare two courses that are exactly the same, but then I go onto their Blackboard sites and I see some things that might be different, might be examples of like poems that are used, or diagrams, or clips or speeches. And so the target and the outcome is the same, but the vehicle in which I use to get there might sometimes look different. And again, it shouldn't look drastically different, but that is why we have that policy, is that we know that in some cases our teachers do need to bring in additional or supplemental resources. So I just wanted to draw attention to that because, again, you will see that on individual teachers' Blackboard pages. Then questions that you have for our team?
Dr. Piazzik.
Maybe a question that will be wrapped up in a comment. I think as a parent, and what I heard from a lot of parents last year is that there just tends to be a lot of apps. And I'm curious, I know at the elementary level, there's classroom level apps as well. At one point, we had 3 elementary school students. Every teacher was using a different classroom app, and that tends to change a lot. Is the goal to migrate away from classroom apps completely to Blackboard or to something else? And then probably have some follow-up questions about that.
Yes, so at elementary in the area of math, we're really trying to make sure that depending on the grade
At elementary, in the area of math, we're really trying to make sure that we aren't app happy and that we're really looking at the tools that we use. And so at elementary, K through 3, we have Blackboard, and then 4 or 5, we have Matific. And so that's where we really want our students spending their time. We've put a lot of research tools, the data that we can get from using them and seeing if it's really helping support a student's journey is really important. And then using some of what we call our high leverage district apps, such as an Explain Everything or something like that, where students are using that app to help explain their thinking versus just an app where they might be doing like math flashcards or something like that. They don't need some of those repetitions for fluency and those types of things.
Maybe as a follow-up to that, and I think this may happen more at the secondary level, but I know a lot of educators still prefer to use Google Classroom. So we've got Google Classroom, we've got Blackboard, we've got all these different resources. Google Classroom is not accessible to the parents. So what should be a parent's expectation about where those materials are actually going to be placed?
That's a great question. So we do, to your point, have teachers who are still used to using Google Classroom for their workflow. Again, prior to launching Blackboard system-wide, that was something that teachers were used to using, and just like anything that's familiar to us and that we have found success with, it sometimes is hard to switch over, right? Sure. And so what we have said to teachers is that Google Classroom most certainly has its benefits for something like what we call workflow. So when 40 students are submitting an essay to you, or at the secondary level, 100 students are submitting something to you, Google Workflow is a very appropriate tool to use. But the message has been very consistent, especially going into this year, that materials, resources, lessons are all to be on Blackboard. So if teachers want to continue to use Google Classroom for what we're calling, again, workflow, submission, handing back assignments, that's an acceptable use of the platform. But a parent shouldn't have to log on to Google Classroom to see assignments, materials. That is not what the platform is going to be used for moving into this school year. And again, we still have transition plans, and we still have teachers who, again, are learning this platform to be able to do that, but that is the messaging and that is the goal.
I mean, just as a comment, I do appreciate the effort that all of you are, including the teachers and administrators, to make these changes, because I think it is well received by parents especially. And I think just managing the complexity of the different tools and resources that we have and having fewer of them, even if they tend to be a little bit more cumbersome to navigate, I think the reward is there for the parents to actually engage in those programs. So appreciate that.
And why we went with Blackboard at elementary, there are some other tools out there that might be a little bit more friendly at an elementary range, but when you're a parent who goes through our system, you go from building to building or year to year, having to learn a new tool every year, why are we putting that load on our students? And that's why we're trying to look at what are the ways in which we're continuing to build out Blackboard, but using that same.
I just want to thank the team for, taking on this issue and dealing with it so quickly and so thoroughly. Very impressed by the work that's been done. It also has to be an advantage from your standpoint, I would think, when you're visiting classrooms or when you're assisting teachers or when they reach out to you. There's one tool that you're using throughout the district that would be beneficial for system-wide communication. So I think that would be another plus to all this as well. So, but just real impressed by the work that you've done, the timeliness of it, and I'm sure the parents are receiving it very well, and they're appreciative of all your extra efforts as well. So keep up the good work, and thank you very much for your presentation and all your hard work behind the scenes. Very noticeable, and we really enjoy having you visit us. Most of you are frequent guests here, and when I saw the lineup of who was presenting this, I'm not surprised at the results. So thank you so much. Our last discussion information item this evening is library book process update. We again have Rachel Herman back. She is our Director of Secondary Learning. Thank you, Rachel, for being here tonight, for all the work that you've done over the last several weeks. I've seen some of that and read over this that you provided with us, and look forward to hearing more about it this evening, as well as answering our questions. So welcome and thank you again.
Thank you for having me. All right, I'm gonna put up here. Sorry, swift transition. So, all right, so I'm here tonight, thank you for having me, to talk to you about how we choose and select materials for our classroom libraries, for our school libraries, but really more importantly, that connection to this theme, which is developing readers in the school district of Waukesha. That is why we have libraries. That is why we do what we do. So I'm going to start with this quote. This is the author of the book Because of Winn-Dixie, and she says, "Reading should not be presented to children as a chore or duty. It should be offered to them as a precious gift." So I have two children. Many of you know this. I have a 13-year-old and an 11-year-old, and I can tell you firsthand that sometimes when I tell them it's time to do our nightly reading, like, I don't always get, "Oh, yay, Mom, I'm so excited to go do my nightly reading." And so how can we, right? Our job as educators is that we know the correlation between a student's volume of text consumed and their reading achievement. Every literacy guru will tell you that the amount of text that a child consumes directly correlates to his or her reading achievement. And so how can we continually develop in our readers a sense of joy about that process? Because when they want to read, right, when they want to and they enjoy it, that will directly show up in our results that we know are so important to all of the stakeholders here tonight. So choice reading, right? The materials that we're going to talk about tonight, our library materials, our classroom library materials, all fall under the category of what we consider choice reading. So as part of our instructional model, students across our K-4 through 12th grade settings engage in what we call choice reading. And choice reading is an incredibly beneficial component of our instructional framework because it really does the following. It promotes that joy of reading. When students have ability to choose the topics that they want to read about, they are more inclined to actually read it. It helps for them to develop a reading identity. So if I said to some of you, like, what are the types of topics you like to read about? Where do you like to read? When do you like to read? Those are all attributes that would go into what we call your reading identity. And that's what we help to develop in students. And we do that through choice reading. It helps to develop their confidence as a reader. For some of our students, when they're in a classroom and we present them with grade level text, that text is sometimes either a little bit above their individual reading level, sometimes it's a little bit below their individual reading level. And so choice reading is usually text that's at that just right level for who they are as a reader, which allows them to really develop that confidence in their skill. Choice reading promotes the exploration of different authors, different genres, different topics. It allows our students to apply the reading strategies and skills that they're learning about across all of the content areas. And of course, it enriches our curriculum. I just was in a 9th grade classroom where they're looking at memoirs. Students were able to pick a memoir of their choosing. And so, again, it enriches the curriculum that we serve. The primary locations within a school that students access choice texts are going to be the school library, our ebook libraries, and then of course our classroom libraries. I'm going to start by talking a little bit about school libraries and our process for how books come into our school libraries. So I think it's important to know our librarians. These are 5 ladies who are working incredibly hard over the course of the last year to do what they do. You can see we have Melena Copleen, Mary Beth Haas, Jennifer Hooper, Jill Wagner, and Margaret Atnand, and they currently service multiple buildings. We do not have a model where we have one library media specialist in one building. And I think that's incredibly important because later on in my presentation, I'm going to talk about our library media assistants and how they are also an integral part of our plan when we go to make sure that kids have the right books presented to them. Each year, on average, our school LMS, so Library Media Specialist team, purchases on average 8,000 books for our school district. I think that's important to note because while I think it's a no-brainer that we would expect our library media specialists to be avid readers, I don't think anybody would expect that our library media specialists are reading 8,000 books per year. And so how is it then, if they're not reading books cover to cover, that they go to adopt a book and purchase a book for the actual school library? So here's what that process looks like. So one is we, of course, start with our board policy. We have policy around the selection of library materials. They also then consult our library handbook, which was presented to you in your packets. This is a handbook that is consistently revised to make sure that, again, it's in line with any board policies that have been updated, and of course, aligns with what the current trends are according to the National Library Association. They look at the current circulation trends, enrollment trends, and student requests. So we look at things like if a student enrollment goes significantly up, significantly declines, the library should represent that. So we have information on how many books should be in a library that serves this many, for example, students. We look at current circulation trends. This book has been checked out, 50 times in the last 2 years. Maybe we need to order a few more copies versus this book hasn't been checked out in 10 plus years. Maybe it's time to weed it from our shelves. The last piece, and this is probably the most important piece of the process, after, of course, consulting the policy, is that they consult reputable sources. And so you're probably familiar with some of these, maybe not familiar with others. School Library Journal, Scholastic. I think most of us remember getting those Scholastic, right? The book journals. The Horn Book Company. And so these are all places that are developed. These are journals, these are resources that are curated by librarians from across the nation. So these are national organizations, and they're curated by not only school librarians, but university librarians, private school librarians. And so these recommendations that are presented to our library media specialist are not just one person's opinion, but it's the opinion of these collective, right, organizations. And so they consult those sources as they go to look at what are the, again, new books that are coming out, what are some of the trends when they go to look at a title. So the system that we use here in our district is Follett, and Follett presents to them, so let's say they've consulted Scholastic and Scholastic said, oop, this is the hot new book in March. What do they do next? They consult with Follett, who presents them with a report, and I'm going to give you kind of a glimpse of the report, but you have the full scope of the report in your packet as well. So the truth is told by Mason Buttle. Hot new book, it's coming out, and our librarians have to decide, do they want to purchase this? They get a report from, like I said, Follett through what's called Tidal Wave. And here's what that report entails. So it will give them, again, the title of the book. It'll give them the price. It'll give them, this is a fiction book, the interest level, which is the grade level that it's recommended, the reading level, and the Lexile level, which usually correlate. Lexile level is just the readability of a text. It'll then, oh, yeah.
I just want to clarify that you've referenced a handout a couple of times, and I'm pretty sure we did not get that in our packet.
One, sorry.
The Follett guide that you're referring to there.
Okay. I will get you it. So it's basically these screenshots, but in a handout, so you can see the full piece of paper instead of 4 screenshots. And we will get that to you. Yes. Yes. It gets you then, so it will give you the learning focus. So for example, this book is around, it's got some mystery, it's got responsible decision making, it's got some characters that might have some special needs. This is really important because as we go to talk about book classifications, this is set by tidal wave. And so while as a reader, I might say, ooh, this book also had a theme around friendship. If it's not listed here, and that's just my perception, it's not going to come up as that, okay? It then goes over just some of the basic product details. So this is a lot more of just, I would say, filing information for our cataloging system should we purchase the book. But again, interest level, reading level. Down here then you'll see reviews and awards. So this, of course, matters a lot to our library media specialist. Some of these awards are, again, national awards that are given to books. And then the last piece, and this is where our librarians have to use their professional judgment, are the book reviews that come from those reputable sources that I mentioned. So they then consult these reviews to determine the placement of the text. So what I want to draw your attention to is that you'll see that these are just 2 of the reviews. And again, I will get you the full review because you'll see that this book, for example, came with 8 of the 8 different reviews. But what I want to draw your attention to is right up here, where you'll see that it says, this review was created by Booklist, and it says recommendations grades 5 through 8. Well, here in Waukesha, that means that our librarians have to make a distinction between, do we want to make this book available to our elementary students in grade 5, only our middle schoolers in grades 6, 7, and 8, and or, right, based on Lexile, based on interest, do we have some high schoolers who might benefit from it? And so this is where that subjectivity and their professional judgment comes into play. Because it's not always a clear-cut picture of this book belongs in this grade level and this grade level only. And so as a result of that, and as a result of the gray that a lot of these reputable sources deliver when they give us those book reviews, we have put into play for the 2021-22 school year what we think is a great next step around helping our families to make some decisions when that gray exists. So we've put into place some parent and guardian notification systems, and I want to kind of detail what that looks like. So beginning this year, all students in grades K4 through 9th grade can opt in to receive email notification when they check out a hard copy of a book from the library. The reason we stopped that at 9th grade was based on Wisconsin state statute, which prohibits us from doing that for students over the age of 16. If we have a student who is in 10th grade and is not 16 and chooses to opt in, we are honoring that request. But because of the cutoff, we had so many students who turned 16 their freshman year, we cut it off at 9th grade. We are currently working with our ebook software platform, which is Overdrive, around email notification capability, but currently it does not exist. That is standard across every district that currently uses Overdrive. And so what we have done is, and I'm going to detail this in the next slide, we have sent out a parent communication that details how any family can access books that their child has checked out through either our hard copy or through Overdrive. But right now, that instant notification that you would get, like you are getting if you opt into these for hard copy books, it doesn't exist with our current platform, again, for electronic books. We're working with them. We're seeing if they can develop it. But right now, there's no way to do that. In terms of one of the most frequently asked questions I've gotten with this is, but can't a child delete their history? Yes, they can. But what I've been telling everybody is just like what we tell our kids about their phones, nothing that you delete is ever permanently deleted. We can access a child's history at any point in time. So even if a child chooses to leave the history, if a parent requested that history, we still have access and could pull it up. So for the parents who have had concerns about that, we have had, and our library media specialists, we are telling them to kind of message that out to parents who are expressing that concern, that if you are truly concerned that your child is reading books that you don't want them reading and then deleting the history, let your child know that every Friday we can give you a printout of what your child read on an ebook, that it's never quite gone. But again, right now it doesn't have the capacity. We know that books are going to present topics, issues, controversy that concern some of our parents. Books are controversial in nature. They center around the human experience, which, right, is not clean cut. And so when that happens, when parents or guardians have concerns around specific texts that are found in our school library, the first thing we want them to do is to contact that school staff, contact the school librarian, contact the teacher, express the concern, right? Express what it is that is going on, because we want to work with those families. If the concern can't be resolved, we do have a district process. It's in line with our policy 9130, which is our complaint policy around any concern around curricular materials. And what parents can do is file that complaint with the Office of the Superintendent. I want to distinguish the two because I think this is really important. That there is a difference between, I have a concern about this book for my child. My child is going through blank topic, or I have a personal issue with this topic and I don't want my child to read about it. We have a process for that. And again, in the past and even up till today, in our parent communication, we illustrated how families can communicate that. You call your school librarian, you call the teacher. I'd like my child, I'd like you to watch out so my child doesn't check out books around this, or, right? The consideration committee is designed for, I have a concern about this book or this text for every child in our system, not just specific to my child and that need. And I think that's important to note, because while I might have concerns about a text or a piece of material for my own specific child, that consideration committee is really designed for looking at something across our whole system. And so I say that because, again, we always tell our families, we want you to go closest to the concern first. And I think we would expect that because that's how we can get the best information. So with that, the family communication that went out, it went out this past week before Labor Day weekend. And that family communication really stated just a few key points of some of these changes. So we, again, shared with families how they could access their child's library checkouts, both digital and hard copy. We shared how they can communicate with their child's teachers and library media specialists regarding book selections. And then we shared how they could access Blackboard to see reading materials, including any book titles. We don't have classroom library book list published yet. I'm going to get to that in a few minutes. But again, we do have, for example, our high school English teachers, right? They teach novels all the time. And so those are things that are put out on Blackboard sites. And so we wanted to make sure that parents understood how to access that so that they could see those reading materials. So that's our school library process. I'm going to go into classroom libraries, but before I do, I'm going to take a pause to see if you have any questions before I go into this part. Otherwise, I can keep going.
If you want me to save this until you're done, I will. Are we going to talk about any more about electronic libraries, or
about our ebook library? I have some stuff at the end, I believe. Do you want to save it until the end? Are you okay? Do you want to tell me what it is, and I'll let you know if I'm going to?
Well, honestly, I'm just really struggling with how. I understand that there's not a solution right now that I, as a parent, can know what my 10 or 11-year-old has access to on their iPad. I just don't understand how it could be legally acceptable for us as a school district to make text that reads as pornography available to children on a device that's provided for educational purposes. I'm just really struggling with how we can be okay with this and say, well, you, Kelly, can log on to your 10-year-old's iPad to see whether or not she's checked out Later Gator or Opposite of Innocence. I just don't think that's enough, really. I mean, so what do we do about that? You know, if we can't control what's going on through these apps, do we need to make the apps not available? Do we need to elevate the age group? It's the young adult fiction is the category that I think we're most sensitive to here. And, you know, you mentioned that in this Follett review services, there's a category called learning focus. I would really like to know what the learning focus area is for some of these books. I'm actually very curious to see what they would write there. So again, and like every other topic, I don't want to undermine the good work that's being done. I really do appreciate the work that you all have put into this. I know that it's a sensitive topic. I haven't heard one person over the last several months say that they want to, certainly not burn books, not ban books necessarily, but banning in context. I mean, I really think we have to ask ourselves, what is it that we're here to do? And I do understand, you know, some of the quotes that you shared. I think, you know, text volume being proportionate to reading achievement. I cannot draw a line between volume of text in these books that parents have raised concern about and academic outcome. I just can't understand how those could be related under any circumstances. So it just brings into question, what's the point where we say, these books don't add educational value, we're here to provide education. There's thousands of other books that do. We just don't purchase them or don't provide access to them, because you can go across the street and get them at the public library if you really need them.
So I am going to address that piece. So I think your question is really twofold, because one is around really the apps itself and what I would say, are able to do, simply to your point, by like having the apps that we use, right? Because we are limited with, like, I'm not a software developer, very few of us in this district are, and so by using the current apps that we have, we're limited to their capabilities. I think that this being a national topic right now, a lot of these companies are very willing to work with us around what does this look like, right, to be able to provide the information that we have many stakeholders asking us, right, for. I want that notification. I want to be able to see it. So I think that's like the first piece in the layer of this that, to your point, we are definitely working on. I think the second piece, and I am going to get to it at the end of my presentation, which is when we do, right, have a concern, or when we do see a book in our media center that maybe has, you know, some attention drawn to it, how do we go back and perhaps even revisit and ask ourselves exactly what you're asking? Is there a conversation that's warranted here around educational value? Is there a conversation that's warranted here around revisiting our process to determine if this book is still the best fit for where we have it placed? And so I'm going to talk about that at the end of my presentation. So if you're okay, can I come back to it then? And then if I don't, have a follow-up? Okay. Okay. Other questions? Okay.
I think you're good. Okay.
So let's talk about classroom libraries then. So classroom libraries are a little bit different. I want to highlight this, and again, in your packets, I provided to you the National Council of Teachers of English, which is, again, our national association that we really look to for guidance around what we do in our English classrooms. They have a statement that was provided to you, the full statement in your board packet, around their belief around classroom libraries. And I just want to highlight the part in bold here. This is part of their statement. That is, English language arts educators, we know that no book is right for every student, and classroom libraries offer ongoing opportunities for teachers to work with students as individuals to find books that will ignite their love for learning, calm their fears, answer their questions, and improve their lives in any of the multitude of ways that only literature can. Classroom libraries are they've been around for quite some time at the elementary setting. They are a fairly new concept at our secondary setting. And I say that because in talking with teachers over the course of the last year in my new position, I'm learning that we have some classrooms where there might not be a classroom library. We have other classrooms where there is a classroom library. And so I'm learning a little bit more about how that systemic approach to our belief that these are a huge value add to students and they're, again, the instructional model, maybe needs some systemic kind of wraparound in terms of how we have built them and what we are going to do to enhance them. So how classroom libraries are formed, teachers align any selections that are found in their classroom libraries, again, to that board policy. I referenced that in my prior presentation, so I'm not going to review it again, but they follow the criteria that's outlined there. Any book that's found in a classroom library, students choose to read. So classroom library books are not assigned reading, so those are all choice books. When we develop classroom libraries, we bring in books, especially when we think about our dual language programming, that are in both Spanish and English, and we work to ensure that our libraries offer diverse perspectives, authors, storylines. We have a balance of fiction and nonfiction, lexiles, variety of genres. So our classroom library shouldn't just be like, these are Rachel's favorite reads, right? It should be representative of what we would expect to see in a school library, just on a smaller scale and for the grade level or the course that we're serving. To fund classroom libraries, teachers have found a multitude of ways to do this. They receive donations, gifts, scholastic dollars. So again, at the elementary setting where scholastic book fairs are a pretty big deal, they use those funds, PTO funds, to make purchases. And so with that said, it's important to note that many times books that are found within a classroom library will be different. So if I'm a teacher and I happen to have the parent who just cleaned out their entire children's book collection because the last kid just went to like middle school, and I was the lucky teacher who was like afforded that collection, right? My library is going to look drastically different than the new teacher who might just be starting out. And so that brings us to why we are moving forward with this system. We have been talking about this for years. And so what it is it's BookSource. BookSource is a classroom library inventory and auditing system. So as I mentioned in the beginning of my presentation, choice reading, the ability to surround our students with books that are of interest to them, that have topics that they pick that are engaging, right? Like that's a critical part of the instructional model. With that said, right now in our system, we don't really have a clear understanding of what our classroom libraries look like. And so what we're going to be doing is using BookSource to inventory and audit our classroom libraries across our K-4 through 12th grade setting, starting with our English classrooms. The platform is free to use. That never happens. And so I did, when I was consulting with them, say like, what is the catch? Like there's got to be a catch. And the catch is they identify for you, right, some holes. So here's where you need to improve. And then they pitch you on what to purchase. It provides teachers with an analysis of their library to assist in the continual enhancement of what goes into it. And then it also offers an optional checkout system so that teachers can keep track of the inventory. We're not sure yet, because this is our first time using this, what that inventory system looks like or how it might be utilized, but it's something we're excited to explore. The timeline for this audit, so again, 7th largest district in the state, like this is not something that's going to be done tomorrow or this week. And so as we look at what our timeline is, we sent out a family communication early in September detailing like this is happening. Again, we value the transparency that we know our parents are asking for around what is in my child's classroom library. And we value what this audit is going to tell us about, right? What books currently do we have across our system in, for example, a 6th grade English classroom? Are our libraries balanced? Do our libraries do what National Council of Teachers of English recommend that they do? Present diverse perspectives, have a multitude of genres, right? So we value what this is. The month of September, we're working with our administrators. We're also collecting teacher feedback to develop the process for how to take the inventory. So we have some teachers who are like, don't touch my inventory. I've got it organized. It's in my bins. It's labeled. Like, I will do this myself. And we have other teachers who are, right, like, are going to want some help. And so we are working on that process for developing it. Our goal is by the end of January, we will have our libraries inventoried. So the months of really October through January, we'll have completed that inventory, again, of our K-4 through 12th grade English classrooms. We'll then move to doing an analysis of what we have found through that inventory, looking at, of course, areas of strength, but also then areas of improvement. We're going to be asking our teachers, as soon as those library inventories are completed, to publish their classroom library list to Blackboard so that, again, all of our families can access what's in the classroom libraries. And then the last piece is that we will, based on our analysis, create, of course, a plan of improvement and a plan of action around what we've identified as areas of need. So that's our general timeline. And again, this is a new tool. It's a massive undertaking. We have some teachers who have, again, you've been into classrooms, many, many books. And so we're excited to see what this audit yields. So looking at then our overarching next steps, we've got some big things and then we've got some like little things, but all of them we think are going to advance our processes forward and help to continue to put the best, experience in front of students as possible. So first and foremost, we are going to continue to work with our existing software companies around age notification for books. So as I mentioned earlier, one of the fundamental problems that we are experiencing as we go through our process is that many of our book recommendations are recommended grades 5 through 8 or grades 6 through 9. And again, many schools aren't set up that way. And so we're working with our software companies, both Destiny, Follett, Overdrive, of what would it look like that if we, as a school system, designate that this book is only going to be allowed for 8th through 12th graders. We want it in the middle school. We want to put it at Les Paul, but we only want 8th graders to be the ones who access it. What would it look like if we flagged that book as such for it when a student comes who's in 6th grade to check it out? It's flagged as, you're in 6th grade, you're not allowed to check out this book. So again, right now the system, it doesn't have the capacity to do something like that, but what would it look like if it could? And so these are the types of questions that we're working with the software developers from these companies on. Because all of these books, if you think of a school library, there are thousands and thousands of books in those libraries. And so again, this is a huge undertaking. How would that happen? And that's a big ticket item that we're looking at. We have historically done this, but as we have been going through some, I would say our own audit, we're noticing that we've had some gaps in this process, and that is our next step can start with the highest grade or age recommendation and go down. So sometimes what we're doing is we find 6 reviews and they're all recommended grades 9, 12, but then we find one review that's recommended for this book could serve in grade 8 or 7 or 8. And so what we want to really help our librarians to really center their attention on is start at the top and then work your way down. Instead of, this is the lowest level that we have found a recommendation for and now work our way up, if that makes sense. And so just because a book is right, a review says that it's appropriate for a 5th grader, can we find multiple reviews that say that? Do we need to screen more carefully? And so we're just, again, going through that process. Dr. Piasek, I think this answers, or I think I'm going to hit on your question here, and that's our weeding process. I wish there was a better name, but there's not right now. I could probably come up with one by next month. But we're going to continue to weed our library materials. This is a process that our librarians have been doing since libraries have existed. And so what that looks like is, again, they're looking at current circulation trends. They're looking at those same companies that I referenced, the reputable sources. They're looking at the blogs that they belong to, the Library Association. and paying attention to the dialogue around books. If a book, for example, this book hasn't been checked out in 12 years, or I'm going to run a report on Destiny to see my books that haven't been checked out, right? Or they're looking at that and then, right, removing those books from our library. We're not banning them. We're not saying that they can't be done, but we can't have book collections of, right, like every time we add 8,000 new books, we can't like put that on top of the 12,000 we already have. As part of that process, what we have done is when we have a parent or a family member or a community member who has come to us, even most recently, with a concern around a title, we have also asked our LMS team to run that book through the process again. So we have asked them to take the book, run the reviews, run it through any of the resources that you have found, and make the decision of does it still belong where we have it. Because what we have found is that a book that might have been recommended 10 years ago to be appropriate for one place, a middle school, is now, 10 years later, not, for example, being recommended to be in the middle school setting. And in that case, again, our librarians are weeding out those materials. And that's why we really ask for that partnership between our families as we continue to develop our processes. That if you have a concern about something that's in a book, we want you to tell us, we want you to, right, we want to know so that we can go through that same process that we went through to get the book in there and decide if that book, right, should remain or, you know what, we need to take it out. So that's the weeding of library materials, and again, we will continue to do that. We have monthly collaboration meetings between myself, Melissa Yao, elementary director, and then our 5 LMS team members, and we really look at those meetings around what are the processes, what do we have in place, and what do we need to continue to do to get better. And then the last piece is we are developing a communication plan to all of our stakeholders. So you heard me mention the family communication. We also sent out a staff communication, and we worked with our LMS team around a communication for our library aides. Because in many cases, our librarians are not always in the buildings that kids are coming into to check out books. And so we needed to make sure that all of our library assistants were in the loop on all of these happenings and some of these changes, the age notifications, et cetera, so that they were also informed on what these new practices were. And so those are, again, some of the overarching next steps as we continue to navigate this topic. So much information. I'm going to be done talking around this topic for a second and take your questions now.
Mr. Como.
More comment or comments as opposed to question. First of all, I appreciate giving us the historical background and what the plan is moving forward. I appreciate you sharing the complexities, the challenges. There's a lot. There's a lot here. I hope what people take from this is that this district is dedicated to looking closely at this, at these challenges. We're a large district. We have to have processes in place. We can't just magically wave a wand and have a few people get together and resolve some of these issues. I'm encouraged by what I see. And we need to give you some time to execute. But I'm very encouraged at this time.
Thank you.
Good. Dr. or Ms. Ronnie, go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. Just a quick question here. So, I understand that it's a long process and there's a lot of work, and I appreciate that. But what is going to be done with these books in the meantime while we're working out our system? Is there a paper version versus the electronic version that some way we can track and notify parents who have concerns with particular books?
So Any book right now that a parent would have a concern over, we would encourage them to follow one of the two pieces, which is one is just articulating to the classroom teacher, the school librarian, like, I don't want my child checking out that book. The other piece is, of course, if the concern is deeper than, again, just their own personal child, anybody can file through that consideration committee. I can share that, again, through our weeding process, we have already looked at some of those books that have been raised as books of concern, and we have already done some shuffling because of recent looking at, again, upcoming reviews, some of the more recent information that we have learned about some of those books versus when they were originally put into our system. And so any parents who came to me with concerns around those titles, I did personally reach out to those parents and let them know the outcome of that process when we did put books that, if a parent came to me and said, Rachel, I've got a concern about this book, I don't think it should be in our library. My next step is always, all right, LMS team, I need you to take this book back through the process. Do we still feel like it needs to go there? And if there was any type of shift or movement in that book, I personally reached out then to that parent to let them know the results of that process. And we would just continue to, I would say, ask, again, for our parents to go to, again, the person closest to that concern, which would be ideally not me, but the librarian media specialist or the teacher.
I also want to add, I know Rachel mentioned this before, but really the safeguard at this point in time is for a parent to have that notification. And so even when we looked this evening, Rachel and I were looking, there were about 340 families that have opted in to get notified currently. And so that is the safest way at this point.
Good. Thank you.
Dr. Piazza.
So I would just like to follow up a little bit on the electronic stuff, and I apologize. I know it's getting late. So I'm assuming that some of these books that you're going to go back and look at, we may come to the conclusion that they don't belong in our school libraries, but they're still on our kids' iPads. So this is a 10-year-old's iPad, and this student has access to sexually explicit material on their school iPad. I understand that we don't have the solution yet, and we're not going to go in and recode the Sora app. What are we going to do about that, though? That seems to me like something we can't just say, well, we have to give it a year or two. Now that we know.
So we do have access. So Sora is, we do have access over what books a student has access to on Sora. So we can most certainly put, so to speak, limits on this book should not be viewable to an elementary child via the Sora app. It's through Overdrive, that's our parent company, and then Sora is the app in which they access it, but that's all, we manage that. So that's
What are we going to do about that? Because I mean, I can tell you right now that those books are available on this iPad.
Yep. So that would be, again, I think right now, while we work with these companies, we would just ask that there's a couple of options, right, that you would contact your LMS team around those books, because if they're still on the app, but we've removed them from shelves, that's just a catch-up moment.
So if you removed something,
if we remove a hard copy, it shouldn't be available via ebook.
Okay,
And so if it is,
so help me
that's just a
understand
time
the electronic subscription then. Are the only books available books that we have in hard copy, or do we pay like a per seat fee for students to have access to the full electronic library?
We have books that are available in ebook version that we don't have hard copy, and vice versa. So it's not a guarantee that just because we have something as a hard copy that we would also have it as an ebook. It goes, in some cases that's the case, but not always.
And so how much picking and choosing do we do on the electronic platform? Or is that a service that someone else is providing to us?
No, we do almost all of the picking and choosing on the Sora platform. And that's why I would just be at my assumption, but again, I would want, and that's where we say, like, go to that person closest to the concern, because if something if a parent says, right, like, I drew a concern about this book and I was told that, something changed, but it's still available here, we would want that LMS person to know about it.
I think what I've heard from a lot of parents is that there's broader access to the electronic libraries. There's just more things available, especially in that young adult fiction. And it's easier for things to become visible to students, and it's easier for students to have access to those things because they just have to click and they have the book. They don't have to take it to a library counter and check it out.
Right.
And then have the risk that their parents are going to get notified about it. So I'm almost anticipating that with the notifications on the hard copy books that we'll see kids moving more to the electronic books, but it's also easier. We as adults use electronic books. So, but again, I guess I get back to the fundamental responsibility that we have. We're here to provide education. We want kids to love reading. So I understand lots of genres, lots of topics. I understand all of that. There's just a point where I just don't understand why a lot of these books belong in an educational environment. I just don't. And I know that's a hot button for a lot of people. It just doesn't make sense to me why we're keeping them. I mean, can we donate them to the public library next? I just don't know where we draw the line. I'm not okay with it. As a parent, I just don't see any value in these things in our children's hands, especially our little ones. I mean, think about it. 6th, 7th graders, these are 11, 12-year-olds. So, again, I'm really grateful for what you guys are doing to provide the transparency. I just don't know that we're done yet.
I wrote down a lot of what you said because I think, again, to your point, the ebooks is its own kind of topic, and so I will definitely do some more digging and definitely put that as, again, it's not that it wasn't ever, but just how can we continually enhance that piece as well.
And I'm kind of to the point, again, I know this won't sit well, but I'm not comfortable with the apps being on the iPads for our middle schoolers, 10, 11, 12, 13-year-olds, if we can't control the content, if we can't prevent them from accessing things that are sexually explicit. I'm not okay with that. And I don't think any of us should be okay with that.
Mr. Como.
Yeah, I'm trying to understand what filtering capabilities we do have with our apps and what content filtering capabilities we do have with our apps. I didn't hear you say there wasn't any. So there's some capabilities. I think we need to understand what that looks like and who controls that. Is that the student? Is that the parent? Is that the district? So just to drive into some of those details a little bit further. And this is an important topic and obviously one that's hitting at the national level. When will we get an update on this? Is it every month, every 2 months, as we progress through our plan?
Tell us. I mean, we have different mechanisms in which we report out to you, right? The most public forum is once a month in this committee.
Okay.
But as you know, we communicate to you every Friday as well. So as you're talking about the filtering capabilities of the apps, Mr. Como, I'm looking at Stacey. I'm thinking, okay, Steve's going to be here next month to give a tech update. This is perfect that he brings his voice around what our current filtering capabilities are on all apps, right? I don't want to make a general statement and say we don't control our apps on our iPad. We need to get more information about what that really looks like.
Absolutely.
And be able to report that out. So I think that makes sense that visibly and publicly, we can absolutely do that next month, but we can certainly give you all updates much sooner as we continue this work. I mean, as you mentioned, Kelly, this is an ongoing process that's somewhat in the early stages, and so it's going to be in work a work in progress, continuous work.
Sure. Well, it's very complex.
Yeah.
It covers many facets. And we are a big district with many, many books. So I am, like I said, I'm very encouraged with our efforts so far. I think it's really important if we over communicate on this topic, that would be one topic to over communicate on. I don't think you can over communicate on this. So I would appreciate an update to the public on a monthly basis. I appreciate feeding us as a board details as we progress along. And we will get feedback from our parents and our teachers and from our whole community. And that's where I am encouraged, because I do think that the plan is a very good plan. Now we have to execute, and we have to see what other challenges bubble up, because there may be some that we're not aware of. And we can direct our vendors in an appropriate manner to help us resolve some of these issues. But it won't happen overnight. It won't. Big district, many processes. Let's keep it in front of people. Let's keep plugging forward with it. It's very important.
Anything else?
I'm just going to say it again. I am struggling with how we can get up and leave this room tonight knowing that we have sexually explicit material available to 10, 11, and 12-year-olds on their iPads. And I know it's been this way for too long. I would like to know there's at least some planned discussion or action about how we identify what those materials are. I mean, it's electronic. You can search. You can pick whatever word you want, and you can search the text of all the available books. And I've done it. And I've typed some words that I don't like typing. But it concerns me when I get 47 matches or 182, or, I don't think we can just focus on the hard books and not deal with what every kid has in their backpack every single day. I'm very concerned about this. And again, I am not saying that we need to eliminate access from everybody. I am saying that we have very young children who should not have access, and that needs to be dealt with as it needs to be treated like an emergency to me, because it's wrong.
And I guess I can assure you that we are meeting with our LMS team frequently, weekly at this point, to, again, try and tackle this. The parent notification, for example, that ability did not currently exist 3 weeks ago. So we are building these systems as fast as we can to try and, again, do our due diligence to the requests that are on the table, as well as what we know is what our parents and our students deserve. So we are working with urgency around this, because we do appreciate the feedback that we're getting from so many of our community stakeholders. But with that said, as I mentioned, our ebook platform and that software, I meet frequently. In fact, I meet monthly with directors from across Waukesha County. And as Joe, you mentioned, this is a national topic that all of us in our districts are currently trying to grapple with. And one of the things that we're all right now working with is how can we work with our software companies to, again, tell them that there's this urgency to build this system, to build this software, because, again, it doesn't currently exist. So there is that urgency, there is that work that's happening behind the scenes, and we will continue to update on that each month.
I'll let you know too by Friday in the board packet, as I talk to the LMS people probably tomorrow or the next day about the apps piece. I mean, I don't have one in front of me that I can do the search as you're mentioning to come up with the 142 titles of what you might describe as not appropriate or not. So let me find that out from them so I can give you some information on the filtering capabilities, and I'll let you know that by Friday.
And then we as a board would have the option of deleting an app if we didn't think it was appropriate.
I would.
There's certain apps that are pushed through from the self-service on the iPad, but at the end of the day, the student and the parent does have the ultimate control of any app on the iPad.
And we do currently have the capability, I believe, but I will double check on this as well, and we can include that a parent can opt out of using our Sora app. So it's not a required app. Now, whether or not we can prohibit a student from downloading it from our self-service is another question, and so that's what we can look into.
And I agree. I mean, it's a really sensitive topic. I think all of us are concerned about it. I think Dr. Piasek presented it very well. That's not what we want to be promoting. That's not what we're all about. That's not the business that we're in. And at the same time, I applaud the effort of this district taking on this challenge and taking it seriously and moving forward at a faster pace than what I've heard any other district doing. And I appreciate all the work behind the scenes. And ultimately, it will be this board that decides how to move forward and give you some direction. So I know it wasn't easy for you to be here tonight, but I think you did a great job, and I think you conducted yourself very well and presented us with a lot of information that will lead to some additional questions, but also the reassurance that many avenues are being explored and many topics are being addressed, and that we can move forward on this. So I appreciate everything you're doing behind the scenes, and I know it's not easy as well as your team, but sometimes education isn't easy. It isn't easy work, but we're here to do it anyway. So thank you very much, Rachel, for being here tonight, and I'm sure we'll continue to get updates from you, at least for the time being, at our monthly TNL meetings. Thank you very much. Next, this evening, our last section is other business. Any recommendations from any committee members for future TNL meetings? Hearing none, I want to thank everyone for your participation and involvement tonight. Our next teaching and learning meeting will be Tuesday, October 5th, p.m. here in the boardroom. With that, our meeting is adjourned, and I hope all of you have a good night. Take care. Thank you.